Okay, hi guys. So yesterday we started talking about object clauses. We were supposed to actually get to informational questions, but the video ended up getting super long and I wanted to make sure you could actually finish it in one sitting. So we're going to review a little tiny bit and then we're going to talk about informational questions. So yesterday we said that object clauses are something relatively important. They had to do with a clause being an object. So does anybody remember exactly what that meant? Please put an answer in the box explaining to me what you think an object clause is. Okay, so an object clause was when the object of a verb, right? So objects are the thing that's being verbed, direct object specifically. When that object wasn't a noun or a pronoun, so it's not something like I'm holding the pen, but it was an entire phrase or sentence. So we had something like, I hope that you get home safe. So that you get home safe is an object clause. So I'm going to write this down in English one more time. I hope. Here's my object clause. That you get home safe. Okay. Then specifically when we use these, we had 4 verbs. Really, I gave you 5, but 4 that were easy to use that were used with that. One of them, of course, was hope. That was hoffen. Do me a favor and list the other 3 for me. So not the complicated one, but the other 3 that were not complicated. So we had glauben, denken, and wissen, which of course you guys just learned brand new just a couple of days ago. So we had to hope, to believe, to think, and to know. And of course this one was to know with facts. Okay, so that's how we were using object clauses. Now yesterday you guys did a little bit of a workbook activity. We will at some point check that, but we're not going to check that today. If you haven't finished it, that was on workbook page 153. Make sure it's done tomorrow. We're going to check it at that point. All right. In English, in German, when we were doing these object clauses, I had said that there were 2 ways of doing them specifically. One was just with a regular word order, but the other one was different. So the first one was regular word order. What was the second way? So that was the boot, right? So booting the verb. And to do that, we needed our little das, which meant that. Now, in this activity from yesterday, you were using that along with wenn and weil in order to complete sentences with modal verbs. Okay. Before we keep going completely with the informational questions, I want you guys to do one more activity where you're specifically practicing making these object clauses, so the word order. So each one of you guys, or each pair of you guys, was supposed to bring a book to the lab, and you guys are going to be on page 176. And on page 176, you're going to look at exercise 5-29. And in this exercise, you have, again, 2 people speaking. That's why there's 2 of you, and you're going to switch back and forth who's doing what. The first person is going to have a sentence like, ich arbeite zu lange. And the second person is going to have an infinitive of a verb and then a suggestion. So this is advice. So this is the majority of a sentence. And you have gehen. And you're going to insert that to make a complete sentence. The first person, you're going to take this and you're going to say, my friend or my girlfriend, in this case girlfriend, thinks. So meine Freundin denkt. So that's your introductory phrase. That's of course that thing of which the rest is an object. So you're going to say, meine Freundin denkt, das, that, and then you're going to take this sentence and make it dependent. So you're going to kick that verb to the end. Ich zu lange, verb is at the end, arbeite. So the first person is saying in this sentence specifically, my girlfriend thinks that I work too long. The second person is then going to give a piece of advice. Now you're going to do this in command form. We're using the command form where you just drop the ending, so you guys don't really need to remember all that much, except that in this case with Neiman you had a stem change. So that verb, you're going to say dann, then, conjugate your verb in command form, geh doch mal ein bisschen früher nach Hause. Just the rest of that sentence. So you're just going to insert dann and make this into a command. And that's why you're switching, because this side always has the easy side. There are a total of 6 of these. If you still don't understand how to form these, before you go on, please stop me and let me help you. I want you guys to go through and do all 6 of these sentences. You do not have to write them down, but if I see that none of you guys are doing them, I'm going to tell you to write them down. So make sure you actually go through and do these. Pause the video, wait for your partner to catch up, go through, and then keep going with the video. All right, so we reviewed all of your object clauses, and I'm going to tell you about informational questions. Now, what is an informational question? That's a weird fancy name for a question that asks specifically for information. So when you're saying an informational question, you're trying to find information that somebody else has. So what time is it? Where's the bus stop? Where do I get a fresh cup of coffee? Right? Those are informational questions because you're seeking information. Now, a lot of the time what we do in order to be polite, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked about wissen, is we put an introduction in front of our informational question to make it polite. So things like, could you tell me? Or do you happen to know? Right? And then we have the rest of the question. So could you tell me where I can get a fresh cup of coffee? Do you know when class is supposed to start? So those phrases, those introductory phrases, are going to change how this informational question is phrased. So the word order in that is then going to change. So I'm going to give you an example. We have just a normal question. So my normal informational question is, wie viel Uhr ist es? Wie viel Uhr ist es? So what time is it? Now, I made my verb light blue to show you the difference. Okay. If I add a clause in the front of that, the introductory phrase, in order to make this more polite, like, do you know what time it is? I'm going to change my word order. So with intro phrase, so my intro phrase in this case, what I'm going to say is, wissen Sie? That one is formal. And I'm actually going to write it in informal too. So I'm going to do wie viel Uhr? And because we have this phrase, this actually boots it without there being a little word. Es, and my verb moves all the way to the end. So it has that same dependent word order that the object phrases have, even though there is not a little word right here. So the verb goes to the end when you're introducing the question. In informal, this would look like this: Weißt du, wie viel Uhr es, and then still verb at the end. So just formal, informal. Another way we do polite questions, rather than say, do you know, we also say, this one is do you know? We also say, could you tell me? Sorry about that. So, könnten Sie mir sagen, wie viel Uhr es ist? Or in informal, kannst du mir sagen, wie viel Uhr es, and verb at the end, ist. So, think polite questions. When you're asking a polite question, you're going to introduce it with a different type of phrase. Phrases are, for example, do you know or could you tell me? Wissen Sie, könnten Sie mir sagen? When you're using that phrase before the actual informational question, so the question that by itself is asking for the info that you want, you're then going to move the verb to the end. So it is just like dependent phrases, dependent clauses, it kicks that verb all the way to the end. Okay. There's another form of this, which is why I'm introducing you guys to this, and that is with the little second word, ob. And I'd already told you guys what ob means. I'm putting it after comma because it is a verb kicker. Now, ob means if. I'm going to write yes or no behind it. So it means if. You can also translate it as whether or not. Both of those work. So when you're using the ob, it has to be a yes or no question. You cannot use this if the answer is not going to be yes or no. So if I said something like, could you tell me if you're going to the movies on Saturday? You can use ob for that. Or if I were to ask, could you tell me if Claudia is home today? Yes, she is. No, she's not. So very, very important. You need that yes or no option. That yes or no, of course, being answering the question, the informational part of that, not just if you can tell that person. So, could you tell me if Claudia is home? Yes, I can tell you, but yes, she is home, or no, she's not home. So in German, this would be, könnten Sie mir sagen, ob, there it is, Claudia zu Hause, and of course my verb is at the very end because it's a kicker, ist. So again, could you tell me if Claudia is home or whether Claudia is home? When you're looking at this question, what is the actual informational question in that sentence? So could you tell me whether or if Claudia is home? What is the information I'm looking for? Am I looking for whether or not you can tell me, or am I looking for something else? So I'm looking for something else. I'm looking for, is Claudia home? That part is the informational question. In German, by itself, you would write that. Ist Claudia zu Hause? And again, that's one of those questions where the verb is in first place, because it is a yes or a no question. So when you have a yes or no question as your informational question, that's when you're going to be using your ob, if you're going to make it into a polite form. Alright, so to practice this, you guys are going to be on page 154. That is page 154 in your spirals. And you're going to do the exercise 5-13, Fragen, Fragen, Fragen. What you're going to have is you have two parts to each one. The first part is going to be your informational question. Okay, that first part is the info question. The second part is the question where you're making it into a polite form. So in the info question, when you have a blank, it's because you're going to add the question word or the W word. So you have to see, ist der Bahnhof? What can I possibly ask with that? So where is the train station? Okay, so your informational question, if it's not a yes or no question, it's missing a question word. So you're going to start with that. Then the second part is you're going to take that intro phrase. Sorry guys. And you're going to make the info question into an object clause. So again, to do that, what you were doing is you took the verb and you kicked it to the end. So here's your verb, kick to the end. Everything else that was in the question is still in the question. They gave you a second example, and that's of a yes or no question, and that's because in that case you need your op. So for that part A, there is no blank because verb is in first place. You have a yes or no question. Or a ye, no, sorry, my S doesn't fit. See, there's an S. Because I have a yes or no question, my polite question is going to start with op, but I still have a verb kicker, so the verb still is at the very end. There are 11 total questions on this page, so you guys have 9 that you need to do. Make sure you have it done before the end of class. We are going to check this and page 153 tomorrow. If you have questions, come and get me.